Social Story PowerPoint by Barbara Jordan White. What is a social story or social narrative? A social story is a trademark intervention by Carol Gray that follows a certain prescription. A social story is a way to share accurate, meaningful information in a respectful and safe manner about social situations to people who have trouble understanding social norms. Social stories keep the physical, emotional, and social safety of their audience as a focus. They explain and describe environments and social situations to people with disabilities. A social narrative does not follow the prescription set forth by Carol Gray, yet may be used with students with autism to explain the environment as part of a literary-based behavioral intervention. Goal of a social story or narrative. The goal of a social story is to share accurate information about a place, situation, or environment to a person who has trouble understanding the perspective of others. The goal is not to change a person's behavior, but to explain the social situation. A social story can alert the person with autism to potential sensory triggers and to potentially confusing social situations. Social stories suggest positive strategies to help the reader navigate the environment. There are 5 steps to writing a social story. Step 1. Identify the audience. Who will be reading this? Step 2. Identify the need or environment that needs to be explained. Why will the audience be reading this story? Step 3. Describe the environment as if you are explaining it to a person from another very foreign culture. Describe any visual stimuli, smells, or sounds in the environment. Include descriptions of the perspectives of people in the environment. Include reassuring affirmations. You may include a positively written directive or suggestion about appropriate ways to navigate the environment. Include some pictures. Decide on a delivery schedule. Step 4 is very important. Decide how, when, and where the story will be read. Step 5, assess the student's understanding. You may consider creating visuals to reinforce the student's understanding. Step 1, target audience. It is important to know who the story is for, so you can write it on a level that the intended audience will understand and find enjoyable or interesting. A story can be for a very young child or a senior citizen. It can be for a person with autism or a group of neurotypical people. It can be written for a group of customers or students and posted on a business, school, recreational facility, or church website. It can be written for your classroom, home, or business. Remember, the goal of a social story is to explain the physical and social environment. Is your story for a class or group? Do you want to prepare your class for a field trip? Do you want to prepare the class for a fire drill? Is there an issue with the class following a rule like raising their hands to speak or walking quietly in line? Sometimes you may wish to create a social story for a class. Although social stories were initially created for people with autism, they can be used to assist any group with understanding social environments. Is the social story for an individual student? Sometimes a student may have a difficult time with a particular issue that others in the class seem to understand. It may be an issue that he or she also has at home. You can write a story explaining the social situation to an individual student. Step 2. Deciding on the topic. Is the story going to be about raising your hand in class? Here are some suggestions for a social story about raising your hand. Sometimes the teacher may ask the whole class a question. I may think I know the answer and want to share it. Other people in the class may think they know the answer and want to share it. If everyone called the answer out at the same time, then it would be hard for the class and the teacher to hear what is being said. We can all raise our hands to let our teacher know we want to share our answer with the class. Sometimes the teacher will call on me by saying my name. If she does, then I can say my answer to the teacher and the class. Sometimes the teacher may choose one of my classmates to answer the question. That is okay. The who and why of the social story or the audience and topic is very important. Remember, the story should improve the understanding of the audience about a specific skill, social situation, environment, or concept. It is important to identify the specific topics, issues, or concerns the audience may have with the above mentioned skill, social situation, environment, or concept. If the story is for a specific person, then one should gain knowledge about that person's strengths and needs via observations and conferences with his or her caretakers and teachers. If the story is for a group, then include information about sensory issues and other items in the environment with which a person may have difficulty. For instance, if going to an amusement park, include information about a potential issue with loud noises, crowds, or waiting in line. Step 3. Writing the social story. Remember we talked about a social story following a certain prescription? Here are the types of sentences used in a social story: descriptive, perspective, affirmative, and directive. Descriptive sentences. A descriptive sentence provides information about a situation. It provides the setting for the story. The descriptive sentences basically answer the who, what, where, when, and why of the environment. Descriptive sentences should give an accurate, objective, non-judgmental written account of the external factors of the situation. This would include the setting, people who may be in the environment, why people are usually in the environment, and cultural expectations in the environment. Here are some examples of descriptive sentences. Sometimes at school we have a fire drill. I may know in advance Or it may be a surprise. A loud bell rings to let us know we are having a fire drill. It is a very loud bell and may ring for a long time. Perspective sentences. Perspective sentences share the possible thoughts and feelings of people in the environment. Be sure to include sentences that share the perspective of others in a simple and clear manner. Describe the potential thoughts and feelings of people that are or may be in the environment. For instance, if you are describing a long line at a store, share the way the cashier may feel, as well as how the other people in line may feel. Here are some examples of perspective sentences. My classmates might feel anxious or scared when the bell rings. My teacher will be glad that the class stayed calm. It is fine to add the possible perspective of the audience, too. I might feel startled when I hear the fire alarm. Remember to try and use words like may and might because you are guessing at the possible perspective of others. Affirmative sentences. Affirmative sentences give the reader reassurance that everything will be fine and they will be safe. Affirmative sentences should be sprinkled throughout the story. Examples: I am fine. I will be okay. I am safe. It will be okay. Directive sentence. A directive sentence suggests a positive response. This is where you can gently direct the audience to perform an appropriate behavior for the situation. Directive sentences should always be stated in the positive, and there should be more descriptive, perspective, and affirmative sentences than directive. Directive sentences must never be curt or marked by an exclamation mark. Remember, you are to suggest and not direct. Despite the name of the type of sentence, one should avoid giving orders or rules in a social situation. Gently direct the reader to an appropriate response or behavior after describing the situation and explaining the perspective of others. An example would be, I can try to raise my hand, or if I get frustrated, I can ask for help. Follow a directive sentence by either an affirmative sentence or a perspective sentence. My parents will be glad that I tried to, or I will be safe. I will be okay. Include pictures or visuals if possible. Include pictures that would depict the environment and be age appropriate for the reader. You can include the interest of the reader if appropriate. Try to avoid excess visual clutter. Notice the two visuals for the boat on the right. Both images have a boat in them, yet one image is more clearly understandable as a boat. You can create and include pictures of your student, class, or child as long as you have permission. Step 4 is to create a delivery schedule. Remember, there is no need for a social story if it's not actually read. Decide when, where, and by whom the story will be read. If the story is about recess, the bus, or lunch, you may wish to read the story immediately before the event. Consider including several environments like school, home, and after school care for the reading of the story. Try to make it a team effort. Demonstrate patience and a positive tone while reviewing the story. Story review should never be used as a consequence for negative behavior. In other words, you may not say, "Oh, hey, you did not raise your hand. Go read your social story 3 times." Remember, that is not the purpose of a social story. Step 5. Assess the understanding of the reader. Periodically check for understanding of the concepts. Clarify any misconceptions. Revise any confusing parts of the story. You can consider a literary-based behavior intervention if a stronger intervention is warranted or if you are really trying to change a behavior. In summary, decide who the audience is, decide why the story is needed, write the story, create and follow a schedule for reading the story, and assess the audience understanding. Please take a moment to view the references, and if you would like more information, Carol Gray has websites and many articles and books on the subject of how to write a social story.